Last offseason, I made the assertion that the 2023 Mariners starting rotation would be one of the best that the franchise had ever seen. And I also made a pretty wild claim that they would be the best rotation in all of baseball. And while that wasn't entirely true, they still finished top 5 in FanGraphs WAR at 14.4 wins above replacement. So pretty good, right? That's a top 5 rotation in all of baseball. We'll take it. And based around their ZiPS projections in 2023 from FanGraphs, they were projected around 15.2 wins above replacement, and being only, about one short of that, I think that goes to show that this pitching staff, although they didn't reach their full potential, showed a lot of willpower last year because there were wrenches thrown into this plan, into the 2023 season outlook from the jump. Robbie Ray only pitched 3 1/3 innings last year when he was projected to be a very stable force in that rotation. Maybe he will never return to the 2021 Cy Young form that we saw, but his velo was up in spring training, and there was a lot of hope around Robbie Ray returning to form in 2023, and it got cut short. Also, Marco Gonzalez got injured very early on as well. Did not make nearly as many starts as projections and outlook probably had him at, forcing the Mariners' hand to call up guys like Bryce Miller, Bryan Woo, and even Emerson Hancock, relying on Luis Castillo, George Kirby, and Logan Gilbert to all be who they're supposed to be, and the rookies to step up when they needed to. And believe it or not, they actually did a really good job of it. And I'm willing to roll out that opinion again for 2024 that this pitching staff, it's going to be one of the best in all of baseball. And I know there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding the Seattle Mariners right now, specifically on the offensive side, but this starting rotation is undeniable. Now, before we get into the projections for the 2024 Mariners starting rotation, I'm going to ask if you guys could please subscribe to the channel. About 57% of you guys who are watching aren't subscribed, and it'd be very awesome if Colton and I could hit 10K by the end of the year. That's kind of our goal, so about 400 away. Got 2 weeks to do it. Let's get after it. So we're looking at ZiPS projections for the Seattle Mariners, and shout out my guy Dan Zimborski, the dude who does all the ZiPS projections for FanGraphs, because all of these numbers here are higher than all the steamer projections, and that's where my headcanon is at for these pitchers in 2024, that they will be better than their steamer projections because Dan said so. And Luis Castillo is only projected a 3.4 WAR by steamer. Heck it, 4.5 wins for Luis Castillo in 2024. Last year, he finished top 5 in AL Cy Young voting. In 33 starts last year, he pitched 197 innings and struck out 219 batters and finished with a 3.34 ERA. A 14-9 win-loss record would cement Luis Castillo as one of the best pitchers in the American League. And I think that he can replicate that again in 2024 with ease. Again, going into 2024, my expectations for Luis Castillo, 4.5 might be a little high, right? I think maybe Luis Castillo and George Kirby flip in terms of where I could see them finishing next year, but Luis Castillo, he's a dominant force out there. He's stable as can be. He is the rock for a reason, and he's just going to go out there and shove just like he did in 2023. Looking at Kirby's projection, 3.9 for ZiPS. For 2024 projection for steamer, it's 3.5. So they like George Kirby, right? A little bit more than Castillo, and I don't blame him, right? Again, I said it, Kirby, he took a big step forward in 2023, and I kind of needed that as a call to action for him in the video I made last offseason, and he lived up to the expectations. Last year finished with a 4.4 WAR. He pitched in 192 thirds innings, making 31 starts. He only missed one when he was sick, I think around the time he was supposed to pitch against the Mets, so that was a little bit unfortunate timing for him, but 172 strikeouts, only walked 19 batters. We know George Kirby likes to live in the strike zone, and that's kind of the reason why he gets beat a little bit sometimes, is that batters know he's not going to be away from the strike zone. They know where he's going to be at more often than not. So if he can work on his secondary pitches, maybe get a little bit more whiff worked into his game, George Kirby can definitely ascend the ranks of starting pitchers, and maybe by the end of the year next year, him and Castillo kind of flip in terms of their Cy Young vote getting. Kirby could be a top 5 next year, and Castillo's in the top 10. But that's a very, very good 1-2 punch at the top of your rotation. You cannot be upset at that. But adding on top of that, it's not just a 1-2 punch. It's a 3-headed monster with Logan Gilbert's 3.8 projected ZiPS WAR. I'm going to be honest, that might be a little high. And Dan, I love you for it, because that, for me, shows that Logan Gilbert's getting the love that he deserves. 3.2 WAR last year he finished with. I will say his ERA and certain aspects of his game in 2022 do look better. 3.2 compared to 3.73 last year, but those expected numbers are where it's different, where it's a 4.11 expected ERA in 2022 and a 3.69 expected ERA in 2023. So Logan Gilbert, maybe he got BAPIP'd a little bit here and there, but again, he was also very elite at limiting walks, only 36 walks last year in 192 thirds innings. He did make all of his starts, so he's been very consistent. You can be dependent on Logan Gilbert going out there and giving you quality innings night in and night out. There's another guy that if he just continues to develop in the right direction, there's no doubt in my mind that Logan Gilbert, he could be a number one on a ton of staffs around the MLB. But on the Mariners, he's relegated to the third spot because they've got so many good starting pitchers on this team. Now, normally in the fourth spot here would probably be Robbie Ray, but he's not going to be back until probably after the All-Star break. So up next is Bryce Miller, a guy that had to be called into action, I think a little bit earlier than a lot of people would have thought last year. Made his debut in May, and Bryce Miller did not disappoint, I would say. A projected 2.3 WAR from Zips in 2024. Last year he finished with a 1.9 WAR, a 4.32 ERA. He did end up getting kind of beat out a little bit here and there. Like, he started his rookie campaign very strong, setting Mariners records, setting MLB records for crying out loud, but eventually did get figured out a little bit. And it's the secondary pitches that he needs to work on, and the stamina, making sure his velo stays high and it doesn't drop off to 92 in the second or third inning. He needs to stay around 95 or 96 for that fastball to be effective. And if it's not, he needs to depend on secondary pitches, which he has been working on. He has been working on a splitter this offseason, and that's why I think this 1.3 by Steamer is a slap to the face for Bryce Miller. I think he can be a 2.5 win pitcher next year pretty easily. I mean, Logan Gilbert went from a 2.2 to a 3.1 to a 3.2. Why can't Bryce Miller continue to develop in that same way, right? 1.9 last year, I could see him jumping up just like Gilbert did after his rookie year. Now, the other young gun that had to get called up last year due to injuries, Bryan Woo, is projected a 1.6 WAR from Zips, and he's actually a little bit more favored by Steamer compared to Bryce Miller. 1.5, whereas Miller's at a 1.3, and I'm not going to disagree with the idea that I think Bryan Woo ultimately down the line will be a better pitcher than Bryce Miller in the big leagues. I think his secondary stuff is already more developed. I think he's got a bit more of a live arm than Bryce Miller. But that being said, Bryan Woo, his injury history or lack thereof of innings, I guess, in pro ball is the concern with his fatigue. And if you notice here in his projections, 40 games, 21 starts. And I think that has a lot to do with maybe Robbie Ray coming back towards the end of the year, or maybe even just giving him a little bit of rest and allowing Emerson Hancock to make some starts. And we'll get into Hancock's projections in a little bit as well. But 1.5 wins by Steamer and 1.6 by Zip, so not a big discrepancy there. Last year, Woo finished with a 4.21 ERA, and he made 18 starts in 87 and 2/3 innings pitched. He struck out 93 batters and walked 31. So there's a little bit for there's plenty for him to work on. And you know, he was a rookie. It wasn't like this grand expectation for him to come up and be this force. And I think going into next year, knowing that Bryan Woo is our 5th best pitcher, I'm very okay with that, because he's going to continue to develop. Bryce Miller is going to continue to develop. Those two guys, I don't expect them necessarily to take the step forward that George Kirby did from 2022 to 2023, but if they continue to just develop how their trajectory is looking, this starting 5 is going to go toe-to-toe with anybody's in the MLB. And even if Emerson Hancock's only projected 0.6 WAR here, and he's only going to make like 11 starts or however the projections like work out, having a former first round draft pick, a highly touted prospect, be your 6th best pitcher on your MLB roster, that's nothing to complain about. And this projection model has the Mariners at 16.7 wins above replacement as a total. And last year, the grand winner was the Phillies at 17.7. So if the Mariners was running these numbers strictly, they would be the 2nd best starting rotation in all of baseball next year. Watch out the rest of the MLB, because they're not slowing down. They're going to be dominating you night in and night out. And that's even with Robbie Ray out. They could get him back by the, like I said, by post All-Star break. But also, it could look entirely different by opening day, because the Mariners, they might need to trade from it to improve their offense in 2024. And a couple of teams have reached out to the Mariners, or have been seen as fits to make some trades with. And Colton made 2 separate videos breaking down the Reds and the Red Sox in terms of what their trade packages could look like and just what the roster breakdown looks like overall. So make sure you guys go check out one of those if you haven't already. Thank you guys for watching this one, and go Mariners.